I'm telling you, we're going to be doing some amazing stuff this year. And through each thing that we do as an organization, but more importantly, that you all do in your local communities and on your campuses, keep in mind that this is not the year to sit back and rest on our laurels, and instead, we are reaching for the high mark. Thank you. Now, please join me in welcoming our guests for this morning's conversation, John Podesta and Daniella Gibbs. John Podesta is the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. Under his leadership, yeah, that's a round of applause. It's our parent organization. Under his leadership, the center has become a notable leader in the development of advocacy for progressive policy. Prior to founding the center in 2003, Podesta served as the White House Chief of Staff to President William J. Clinton. He served in the President's cabinet and as a principal on the National Security Council. While in the White House, he also served as both an assistant to the president and deputy chief of staff, as well as staff secretary and a senior policy advisor on government information, privacy, telecommunications, security, and regulatory policy. He kind of knows a little bit about everything. Most recently, Podesta served as co-chair of President Obama's transition. There, he coordinated the priorities of the incoming administration's agenda, oversaw the development of its policies, and spearheaded its appointments of major cabinet secretaries and political appointees. John, thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. Daniella Gibbs is a special assistant to the president and director of message events. In her position, Leger works with numerous White House departments to ensure successful presidential events. Before joining the White House, she served as the Vice President for Communications at the Center for American Progress, specializing in domestic and economic policy as well as the center's overall communications strategy. Prior to joining the center, she was the Deputy Director of Communications at the Democratic National Committee. Daniella, thank you also for being here with us today. Thank you so much. So a quick reminder to you all that during the conversation, you all are more than welcome and actually encouraged to submit questions via text and Twitter. You heard the instructions earlier this morning. We will then, at the end of this conversation, take some Q&A from the audience at the microphone in the middle, and also a couple questions that were submitted via text. So please keep that in mind as we go through the conversation. So I'm actually going to start talking a little bit about David talked this morning, I spoke a little bit this morning about how we are pushing really hard for some progressive policy. Things are moving relatively quickly, and we're excited about the direction that we're taking. From an insider's perspective, as you both either currently are or have been, let me ask you, how do you think the president is doing on the economy, on climate change, on some of the issues that are most important to young people's economic future? Let me start with you, John.
Okay, thanks, Erica, and welcome everybody, and it's great to see so many people here. Look, I think that the president was just in Russia. They were using the term reset the relationship with Russia and the United States. But I think more broadly, we have reset the policy in America across a broad range of issues. And I think that he's shown remarkable strategic vision, real tenacity. He's gotten a lot accomplished already. He started off by appointing great people, I think, to his administration, a very diverse group, people who are experts in their fields and who are working really hard past the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And I think he gave a very important speech, which I recommend to everybody at Georgetown University here about maybe 2 months ago, which he talked about the new foundation, investments in education that you so eloquently talked about at K through 12 as well, and real reform in education. This big project of changing the way we produce and use energy from a high carbon to a low carbon base. We've just made progress. Speaker Pelosi will be here later today, but really with her leadership, the House has passed a major climate and energy bill. And then healthcare is the topic of the scrum of this summer, which we're fighting very hard to see reform happen. And I think that he's got a good team. We'll hear from Secretary Sebelius later, but this is tough work. Special interests don't give up easily. The status quo doesn't give way easily to change, but I think the president has really reset the direction of this country in a very positive and progressive direction, and he's made a lot of progress. But we're still suffering in a tough economy, and I wouldn't say we need to be patient, but we need to be, I think, cognizant of the fact that he started from a very deep hole and he's digging our way out, and I think we need to support that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of times people get caught up in the 24-hour news cycle in Washington, and people sometimes have to step back and look at all that he has accomplished. It's amazing how many bills have been signed and how much legislation has been passed for the first couple of months of his administration. It really is, I think, history making. And also, just to piggyback off what John said, I mean, it took 8 years to get into the mess that we got into. I don't think anyone really thought we were going to get out in 4 months. And I think we have made remarkable progress. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and the president acknowledges that every day.
Now, what about, and I think particularly relevant for this audience, a common, I think, meme or message that I hear is that we understand that there's so much work to do. We're excited about the work that he's done so far, but we want him to be a little bit bolder on the work that he's done. We want him, I think a common phrase I hear is that we want him to lead from the front. I know he's kind of taken a backseat in some of these things and letting things work out in Congress, particularly with climate or health care. I would ask you, number one, what do you think about that? And number two, what do you think the president thinks about that? How does that criticism, how is it received in the administration? Is there a good feedback loop of that criticism, and what is he doing about it?
Well, I think he's always listening to what people have to say, and that's one thing that's great about this president, is that he wants to take criticism, and he wants people with different points of views around the table around him, and if people who he knows disagree with him aren't speaking up, he will call on them and make them tell them why they disagree with him. But I do think that he is, he's someone who studies history, and he looks at the battles of the past. And I think he's going, especially to the health care debate and some other important issues, and thinking, in the past when a president has put himself out there, put a plan out there, maybe that hasn't worked. So it's not that he's not working behind the scenes, or that everyone.
Particular president in mind?
No one in mind at all. But I think that he feels, and the administration feels, that there's an appropriate amount of push and pull both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. So, I mean, I think that it's natural for everyone to want the president to be out there, especially when he ran such a dynamic campaign and such a forceful advocate for these issues. But governing is different, and so I think that he is learning from the past and kind of forging his new way forward.
And John, what's your perspective on that, especially being someone who doesn't work for the administration anymore and kind of pushes a little bit?
Yeah, I think that one's a process criticism, if you will, and one's, or at least a process question. One's a substantive one. The process one is he given too much rope to the Congress, and can they find their way through, or will they kind of compromise too far down the trail? And it seems to me that, as Daniella said, that he's getting a lot done, that he's intervening at the right moments. Take the climate and energy bill. I think that when Congressman Waxman, who was getting ready to mark that bill up, was having difficulty bringing his committee together, the president brought all the Democrats down to the White House, told them how important it was. It was the challenge of a generation. And that, I think, was an important moment that helped forge agreement that got the bill out of the committee. And then he used the occasion of the congressional picnic to go round up the votes to ultimately pass the bill, passed closely 219 to 212. There have been some complaints. So that's the process issue. I think he has intervened at the right moment. I think he's got a team that is very experienced on Capitol Hill, and they're pretty deft in managing it. The other implicit in that, I think, is a substantive question, which is he bold enough? Is he progressive enough? Right. Is he going far enough? Right. Is he pushing hard enough? And I think that that's a place where I think, for the most part, I think that I'm with him. There are a couple of issues on which I think he needs to go further, and we've been, outspoken, I think, in suggesting that the political system will bear more push, that he can get in front, and I think that this comes up to some extent in healthcare in terms of will the Congress settle for a watered-down bill, or does he need to get in front and push? And I think at this moment it's a little bit, you can't judge that really. They're really just in the moment in which the House is bringing that bill together. The Senate is. There are different versions in the Senator Kennedy's committee and the Finance Committee in the Senate. So you don't know that yet. But I think he's been a forceful advocate for change, for reform. for a system that will be affordable. And I think we need to keep, on the outside, we need to keep the pressure on for a very strong, very solid, very good bill. I said there are places where I think he's kind of fallen short of the mark. We've been pushing at CAP for him to use his executive authority to stop separating servicemen and women who are gay or lesbian under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. We think he has that authority. There's some question in the White House whether he does or he doesn't. I won't make Daniella offer a legal opinion here on that question, but we think he can go further on that, and that he can push hard and sort of get in front and not wait for a political consensus on Capitol Hill to resolve this question. He says in order to do it, he needs permanent legislation, but we think that he's got a lot of executive authority which he can move the ball forward. So I think on the outside we need to render good judgments about those kinds of things, see where we need to go. But it's our job, I think, to keep pressing for heavy change, but also to try to help lift up the ideas and the actions that he's taken and try to get them across the goal line.
Both of your answers referenced other people a lot. You definitely talked about the pressure that he can and should be placing on Congress and on the political system, but you also talked a lot about the pressure that we as citizens should be placing on him, pushing on him, also on Congress. I know there were a lot of, at least the media said, newly engaged audiences and communities during this past election. And I want to talk a little bit about, first, how do you think the president is doing in engaging and outreaching to those communities? And then secondly, what impact do you see that as having? And why don't we start with you, Daniella?
I think he is doing a really good job of reaching out to communities who typically haven't heard from their White House. And I just want to say that we are challenged at the White House. As many of you know, we do not have access to Facebook or Twitter. But however, our new media team has still managed to work around that issue, and we have a page on Facebook, and we have a MySpace account and a Twitter account, and we've done a couple of events now where people can watch it live on the internet and then interact with the president, and we've done events with high-ranking administration officials. I mean, I think they realize that not everybody follows MSNBC or CNN 24 hours a day or gets all their news from those channels, so you need to reach people where they are, and where they are is on the internet, where they are is on texting. And so I really do think that, despite all the challenges that we sort of walked into in the administration, I think they've done a pretty good job of reaching out to especially young people.
Can I actually ask a follow-up there, and then I'm going to come with a different question for you, John. I know we talk a lot about technology, and I think as a generation we've taken that to heart, really appreciated that and taken advantage of that. But there's also a segment of the population when you start talking about disparities that aren't on Twitter and aren't on Facebook and don't have access. We talk a lot about the digital divide. Right. So I think in addition to technology, there's also some questions about what other ways is he reaching out to engage different communities?
Well, we have a large office called the Office of Public Engagement, and basically that department is there to reach out to you. And we have many different people who work with many different groups, and we're very cognizant of the digital divide. So, for example, when we do town halls, to make it fair so anyone can come who wants to come, we have something set up online so people can go ahead and get random tickets. But we also have something where people can call, because we realize that not everybody has access to the internet, and we make sure that those groups that typically do not have access to the internet are the ones who can call into that phone line and also get tickets. And there are people who are reaching out to traditional civil rights groups. So there are many different people who all day they sit and think about, how are we getting our message out from the White House to these groups who have been very supportive of the administration and were very supportive during the campaign. And it's not just about doing stuff on the internet, but it's also like going where people are and meeting with groups and traveling around the country and going to conferences and making sure that the message is getting out in many different ways.
So John, how do we use that power? So we have the power, we're now, as young people, we're kind of recognized as a strong voting bloc, or a coveted voting bloc, if you will. And then we also have an administration that's doing a relatively good job of trying to reach out to us. So how are we strategic about that? What is the best way to utilize that to kind of advance progressive policy?
Can I start with a quick story about my tenure in the White House? I was just listening to Daniella. It reminded me of my first day in the White House. I started with President Clinton on January 20th, 1993, and I had a job that caused me to actually have to work right after the inauguration. I went into my office for the first time in the West Wing. The West Wing's sort of like a house. You're kind of wandering around in these warrens, and I found my office, which was hard, because I didn't know what the layout was. And they directed me there. I walked in, and my computer was sitting there, and there were wires hanging out of it because the hard drive had been subpoenaed by an independent counsel. And it took me like 2 days to get on the computer. Fast forward, I was the first, I literally believe this, I was the first chief of staff, I started in 1998, who actually knew how to use email. So think about how far we've come. That was only 10 years ago. And now we have, Ron probably twittering away out there someplace. And sending tweets over to, he's probably on the screen right here, sending questions in. So we've come a long ways, and I think there's real tremendous power in that. I think one of the things that the Obama campaign did, which I think should be a lesson, we tried to make it a lesson in transition, I think the people in the White House are trying to make it a lesson, was that they figured out a way to not be completely top-down. That is, they had a very structured leadership in the campaign that was setting strategy and communicating message, but they gave a lot of power to people, at the edge of the cloud, to people in neighborhoods, in communities, doing their own organizing, to let them tell their own stories, to not, to kind of empower the kind of spirit of change by people who were active with respect to that. And I think that's the real challenge in the White House, which is, how do you take, when you're in the ultimate position of power and authority, and give some of that power and authority away to people in their own communities to try to innovate, to try to create the information that bubbles up to the White House to inform their strategy, to what's working, what's not working, and also to key them into what the president's trying to accomplish. And that's a work in progress, and I think that the way government does information technology is a challenge from that perspective. I think the White House new media team has found it challenging to replicate that same kind of spirit. But I think it starts from strategic vision that the president, I think, needs to set. But that has to be informed by what's going on at the grassroots level. There's got to be a way for not just to be a point to multi-point distribution system, that is the White House out to the people in America, but for people in America to feed back information into the White House and to be informed by that. And I think that one of the offices that has also been created is this Office of Social Innovation, to try to network with people who are active in their own communities, doing experimentation of real social change and bringing that together at a national level. I think this will work best if people feel like they own a piece of the action here, that the people at the community level in the campaigns that you're talking about are invested in and are helping to shape and mold that effort going forward. And so I think it can't just be the president giving speeches or town halls or whatever, saying what he's thinking, but it has to, the strategy itself has to be informed by what's happening at the grassroots. That was a hallmark of, I think, the Obama campaign. The question is, can it be a hallmark of the Obama presidency?
And the president, he always has acknowledged, and he still acknowledges now, that the best ideas don't always come from Washington. And he's always about reaching out, and you're right, that the Office of Social Innovation is one way where they're talking to people in the states, where things are actually working, and trying to say, well, how can we replicate this success on a national level? So they're always looking for ideas.
I think there's another area that when people talk about this election and this administration and presidency that's kind of different and unique, it's not just in the level of engagement of different audiences, but also in actually, you talked a little bit about his appointments and the people who he surrounds himself with, that there's just a very noticeable increase in diversity. And I don't just mean ideological, but also in demographics. So is there a tangible impact of that? Or, some people say, is it just window dressing? Have you seen a marked difference in the way that Washington works, or the way that the administration works, or the policies that come as a result of increased diversity?
Well, I think anytime you have people from different backgrounds and different walks of life and different experiences, it's going to change the way you govern. If you just surround yourself with people who are just like you and always agree with everything that you have to say, I don't think that's an effective way to run government. So I definitely think, and you can probably answer this better, I may be too close to this, but yes, I do think that there is a change for the better in the way that this administration is governing, the way that they are listening to people and the policies that they're putting forth, because you have a different group of people surrounding the president giving him different types of advice.
Last question, and as I ask John this last question, if you have questions that you want to ask live, I'm probably going to only be able to take a couple, but please make your way over to the microphone in the middle of the room now, or you may also text them in. So for the last couple minutes that I have to ask you all of my questions, let me just ask you, what is the unique role of young people in kind of pushing progressive policy, if there is one? What do you think is a unique role that we can play right now in this critical moment?
Well, first of all, I think just an observation, which is this cohort of people, 18 to 30, is the most progressive part of the electorate. And you might think, well, that's always true. Young people are always more liberal than their parents or whatever. But that's actually not true. That, this is a very significant change of political attitude. Not only did they vote in overwhelming numbers, 35% advantage to Obama at the presidential level, and to some extent in equal numbers down ballot, but their political attitudes have shifted very much in favor of a progressive direction. And I think that it was the source of a tremendous amount of organizing that actually made the difference in politics. So now the question is, will it make the difference at the policy level? Will people stay engaged, fight for change? Can I take a spin off of your Michelangelo quote? You said set the bar high. I completely agree with that. But the process of getting change to really happen is not just setting the bar high. It's sometimes crawling on your belly and constantly fighting and getting one victory, and maybe it's not enough, but keep working your way up towards that high bar. And that's a process that I think there's a danger when in that metaphor, when you set the bar high, if you get cynical that it's not achieved quickly, or it's not achieved at the first instance, or compromises get made in the political system and you kind of undershoot the mark, that you give up. And this is not a time to give up. This is a time to fight harder, to work harder, to get back out on the street, to organize more, to beat the banks in the debt campaign, to get real health care reform done, to get a climate and energy bill in place. But we're not done with that. We're going to have to come back year after year after year. This is the challenge of a generation. We're going to have to fight and fight and fight in order to create a clean, sustainable planet. And so the idea of staying in the game, I think, just has to permeate the sense of organizing that comes at this conference and going forward. And I think that maybe Obama in that context is a great role model, because he started as a community organizer. Now he's a national organizer, and I think actually what we're seeing in Rome or in Italy and in Russia is that he's an international organizer that has got to tie humanity together, really, to see that kind of change happen.
I've got so many more questions, but I want to take a moment. Is there anyone who has any from the mic? If not, I've got some here text-wise. Yeah, come on forward.
Can't see the mic.
Yeah, it's hard to
working?
see. Yeah,
Hi.
it is.
My name's Gabriel Elsner. I work for the Student Pergs. My question has to do with special interests in the United States Congress. We've seen an energy bill get watered down. Now we're seeing the public option possibly get picked away. The healthcare industry is spending over $1 million a day to defeat comprehensive healthcare reform. So my question is, how should we be organizing? How can we change the United States Congress so that we actually are getting real reform? We don't have that long to transition this world to a clean, sustainable planet. We have 10 years before we're seeing climate change that's threatening life as we know it. So my concern is, if we continue the same model of organizing, the United States Congress won't change enough to get the real solutions we need. So if you have any insight, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
Yeah, the special interest, that's one thing that unfortunately did not change with this election, and they are spending records amount of money. And, I think the thing that you have to do is you have to keep being vocal, and you keep, if it means you have to go up to Capitol Hill and march on your congressman's office, and be targeted about who you go after. You can't be discouraged by the amount of money that they're throwing at it, because that unfortunately is not going to I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So you have to keep thinking about innovative ways to put the pressure on and make people feel that, if we don't listen to this large group of people, maybe our seats are in jeopardy. Maybe we won't have the support that we're used to having. And so I know it can be discouraging because the healthcare industry is throwing out so much money, but don't give up the fight. And I just want to say one thing on behalf of the administration. President Obama is strongly behind a public option. He put out a statement about it yesterday, so I just want to reiterate that. I know there were other things that were being said, but the president is behind a public option.
Okay, so I'm slightly tempted to say, what did you expect? I mean, these guys are not going to give up what they have easily. You have to go fight and take it from them in order to get, I think, real change to happen. Let me tell you a story about a guy who named Tom Perriello, some of you might know. He's a young congressman. He just got elected from a district in Southern Virginia. I first met Tom in the 2004 cycle. He had been involved with a group that was organizing in Sierra Leone to stop the flow of blood diamonds out of Sierra Leone. He came back to this country because he thought the most important thing that could happen, along with a couple of people who eventually formed a group called Avas, which you might, some of you might have been involved with. It's a faith-based group trying to make social change around the world. He came back in 2004 because they thought that more important, maybe even than stopping the flow of blood diamonds, was to try to change the election, to try to get Bush out of office. And they organized the faith community in 2004, some extent successfully. And he left that, and he decided that the way to really make change happen was to try to run for office in an impossible district against an incumbent Republican in Southern Virginia, in a district that Obama lost by 12,000 votes. Tom won by 700 votes by going door to door, parish to parish, church to church, community hall to community hall. He just took a very tough vote on the climate bill. It might not, it wouldn't have been the bill I would have written if I had sat down to write it, but I think it's a solid bill that will make, as our calculation is by 2020, it'll take the equivalent of 500 million cars off the road. Tom took a very tough vote. The Republican House Campaign Committee came down on him like a ton of bricks. He's their number one target. Rather than kind of cowering, he stood up and said, "This is what I ran for. I'm going to challenge what they're saying about what this bill does, what I'm about, and we need not just to support the campaigns at the lobbying level. We need to support brave leadership like Tom Perriello. He's going to run in 2010 without Obama leading the ticket. It'll probably be the number one challenged race, I suppose, in the country. But I think that when leaders stick their neck out like that, then we need to find ways to support them. And when the reverse of that, when people disappoint us, they need to pay a price for that. And I think that maybe I'm just been at this too long. I started doing campaign work in 1968, but there were special interests then. There'll be special interests in 2048 if we're all still around then. And I think that the model of organizing both to do the kind of serious campaign work that the Purgs do, but also at the political level to get the right kind of people into office is really critical. We can try to reform the way we do campaign finance. We can try to reform the way redistricting works in the country, and I'm for that. But ultimately, it's going to take it's going to take tough work and shoe leather and organizing and support for people who have the guts to go out and do what's right in tough districts in this country.
Got another question that came in actually via text, and it's pretty specific. It said, with unemployment rising and the possibility of a second stimulus, what kind of an impact will this make on the administration's agenda? So kind of with the statistics continuing as they are in the same direction, what do you think is going to change and what impact will this have on the administration?
They were talking about this on Morning Joe today. They were saying, oh, well, the unemployment numbers keep going up or they don't go down, and if we don't start seeing more jobs being created, is this going to be a repeat of what happened before, and American people aren't going to sit for health care, they're not going to sit for energy reform. I don't think that's the case. I think that the American people realize that we're kind of at this unique point in our history where we can enact very bold change now, and I think people realize that if we wait a year or 2 years, the environment's going to change, and there's no point in waiting when you have an opportunity to do it now. So will there be tweaks along the way? I think that's possible, but I don't see a fundamental change in his agenda. He wants health care bill by the end of the year. He wants energy reform. He wants to reform the way we send our kids to college. And I think that all is going to happen. On the stimulus front, I think it's a little early to talk about a second stimulus right now. I mean, we just enacted the stimulus a few months ago. It takes a while to get all that money out, but where the money is going out, you are seeing jobs being created. You are seeing jobs being saved. So I think in a couple of months, maybe they'll revisit that, but no one's talking about a second stimulus right now.
Okay, great. Got another question at the mic?
I'm not tall enough for this. Sorry, this is a similar question, and maybe it's better for Speaker Pelosi, but I don't know, I'll have a chance later. I think a lot of times people, especially our age, get the impression that the enemy is in our own party. I mean, Senator Franken was seated. 2 days later, Harry Reid says, it's not my job to get votes for issues, and this doesn't make a difference. And we have 60 votes. Republicans shoved everything through last decade with much, much smaller majority. I mean, what do we do when our congressional leadership doesn't say, we will pass this, we'll get this through, we'll get this done? I mean, we can't find another party. The Republicans don't stand for us. There's no other viable party that's going to say we're going to get health care done. We have Harry Reid rewarding Senator Lieberman for voting against us on most of the biggest issues of my generation. So what are we supposed to do when our own leadership is somewhat apathetic to what we voted for them for?
That's a great question. And it's a great question, and I don't think there's any, I think if there was an easy answer, we'd all have it. I think that it seems to me we can't settle for that kind of thinking. There's got to be pressure on the leadership itself. And to some extent, there's got to be pressure on the White House to put pressure back on the leadership. And I think that I have a little bit of, I suppose I have a little bit of sympathy for Senator Reid in the sense that I look around at his caucus and understand how hard his job is. But I don't think you can settle for a statement like that. And I think you have to kind of you have to call out the fact that we're demanding serious change. And indeed, it is the job of the leadership to round up votes, to push legislation through, to try to get the kind of bold initiatives that the president's talking about passed and to his desk and signed. And I think that I have to say, I think that again, there'll probably be just a little bit of dispute in the room about how far the bill went. I still think the job that Speaker Pelosi did, that Congressman Waxman and Congressman Markey did, getting this energy and climate bill through the House was remarkable. And that took every ounce of leadership from her beginning at the beginning of the year. They had a tough leadership fight in the committee when Congressman Waxman took over the committee, all the way through to the final 219 to 212 vote. That is real leadership, and that's, I think, what we should expect, and that's what we should demand, and that's what we should put pressure on the members of their caucus to push back on their leadership. And you just cannot settle for, what am I supposed to do? I've got one outlier who won't vote for cloture. I think they've got to, we've got to both put pressure on the members who are not supporting a progressive agenda, but we also have to put pressure on the leadership to come up with a strategy to find the votes to kind of get these things and move them forward, and we just can't settle for less than that.
Great. Let me take you.
Thank you so much. This also regards the climate change, and I've had the privilege of interning on the Senate Energy Committee for the past month, and there I saw that the regional conflicts were really what was deciding a lot of it. And so what do you think is the best way to both assure maybe conservatives or just people from certain areas of the feasibility of new climate change policy, as well as, you know, get all the people already on board to stay on board? And do you think, or what role do you think that young people can have in really pushing the idea that businesses can and should move forward into the green future?
You know, that's a great question. And I think that really what has to happen, and I think what we've tried to do at CAP, what I think the president's really embraced, is that the changing our energy platform, going tackling the problem of climate change, moving from this high carbon energy system we have to a low carbon system, is the engine for change, for innovation, for business creation, for job creation in the country. A lot of our time and effort, we've worked with Van Jones, you'll hear from him later, who's now in the administration, has been on both analyzing and demonstrating that this is good for employment, it's good for business innovation. I read a story in the New York Times 2 days ago, I think, in the business section, that since the Congress passed I think 3 years ago, a bill that set energy efficiency standards for light bulbs, thinking that they were going to phase out incandescent light bulbs in favor of compact fluorescents. That's what they thought they were doing. Instead, what's happened is there's been more innovation in the incandescent light bulb in the last 3 years than since Thomas Edison invented it. So I think if you can get the policy drivers going, if you can get the finance behind it, if you can enlist people who have a real sense of opportunity, of excitement, of innovation, and business entrepreneurialism in the cause of transitioning to this low carbon base. And we need to get all those voices in the game. This is probably the most daunting challenge and problem that humanity faces. It's also the most exciting and innovative opportunity, I think, that the country faces. One of the things I think that some of the members who voted for the bill from Ohio were getting, again, hit by the Republican House Campaign Committee and by conservatives. We did an analysis, state-by-state analysis of job growth that would result from this transition. And Ohio's a big winner. You know, a lot of their electricity comes from coal-fired power plants. On the other hand, the manufacturing that is likely to occur from a movement towards renewable energy, particularly wind, and from efficiency and building efficiency, is going to be stuff that's made in the industrial heartland. And Ohio has a big uptake and a big opportunity. And I think that getting validators to tell that story, unions, businesses, people on the ground, to say this is where our future lies. We've seen what the past looks like. It's not very pretty. We got to move into an innovative future, and I think that's the key to success, to kind of corner and gather up the votes to get this thing passed ultimately.
We're going to take our last question from text, and I'm going to end it on a practical note, but also I think relatively inspirational. And the question was, what would we need to do to get to a point where you are in your career? So some career advice to be where each of you are. That was a question that came in. I think it's a good question. Why don't we start with Daniella?
Oh, okay. I guess my first piece of advice is, if you're interested in doing what I do and working in politics, is when you graduate, go work on a campaign or volunteer in a campaign. They don't pay a lot of money. Sometimes they don't pay any money. The hours are bad, but the experience is you can't quantify that. My first job out of college was working for Ruth Messenger, who had the misfortune of running for mayor of New York City against Rudy Giuliani in 1997. We were happy with a 17-point loss. We thought it was going to be a lot worse, but the experience I got was invaluable, and it made me realize that I wanted to do work in communications and work in press, and also the people that I met. And in fact, one of the people that I worked with on that campaign is now the political director at the White House. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is just to, if you want to work in politics, if you want to work in communications, get on a campaign, volunteer in a press office. And don't turn down opportunities because it's not like the most glamorous thing. What you need is experience, and what you need is the ability to network and meet more people who do what you do.
John?
Well, I sometimes get asked the question, how do you get to be the White House Chief of Staff? And I actually reflect on the first Clinton White House Chief of Staff, Mac McCarty, which I said the most important thing is go to kindergarten with the next president, with a future president of the United States. That's very helpful. My second piece of advice, reflecting on my own experience, is I was always just too dumb to fall down. No matter how many times I got punched in the face, I just wouldn't just go to the canvas and throw the towel in. My only actual practical piece of advice is, in my own life, it was always very helpful to have a spouse that worked.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I can't elaborate on that. I always felt that particularly in politics, you live sort of on a high wire. You can make mistakes. You can't. We're watching this play out in living color with Mark Sanford right now, but you can't. You have to be prepared to risk your job or to walk away from it if you think it's calling you to do something you don't feel in your heart is right. Mm-hmm. And that gives you the ability to say no to power, to stand up to power, to try to do the right thing, and to literally be prepared to kind of walk away from it if you need to. But it is really good to have a safety net, to know that there's someone who will pay for the food bills for the kids when you actually have to entertain that and walk away from it. So it's important to have a spouse that works.
Well, on that very practical note, we're going to conclude this morning session. I want to thank you all both so much for coming with us. Thank you very, very, very much. And for all of you out there, we've got some really, really exciting workshops planned for the rest of the day. It is now time for you to begin that. This morning's panels are going to be very interactive, so get your brain flowing and your juices going. Look at the agenda that you were passed out and given at the beginning of the day to see where to go. Don't forget to drop off your SOB and network cards, and we'll see you back here shortly.